Welcome back. Let's bring in political strategist Jim Moore now to talk about that press conference that we saw today with the Premier and the Mayor. We'll try and take a bit of a deep dive here. I'd like to start with the style first and then the content. Is that okay?
Right, for sure.
All right, so now the relationship between these two guys, to me, it's always been kind of Shakespearean, and we've talked about this before. You got one guy who wanted to be Premier, became Mayor. Another guy who was Mayor, wanted to be Premier, right? It's kind of mind-blowing, and there was so much... there was this war of words, all these declarative statements between them about a year ago over the council downsize, the upload, service cuts. Yet here we are today. They shared the stage, presenting a really unified front on this guns and gangs issue. Kind of curious, huh?
Yeah, it's quite remarkable to see them not fighting with each other, right? It's like a breath of fresh air. And so I think this issue is a growing issue. It's very high on a lot of people's awareness. It makes them, fear and their safety is a huge political issue, a motivator to get people to vote for change, neither of which these people want to have happen. So the Premier and the Mayor know they've got a lot at stake. They have to be seen to working together on this. And if they're going to fight, it's going to fight it all against and united front against the Prime Minister in the upcoming election and against the other candidates. So they have a common foe in the gangs, they have a common foe in the Prime Minister, and it'll be interesting to see how they work to collaborate and whether there's some momentum coming out of this issue for them to do this on other issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, the public safety issue kind of came out of nowhere and at the end almost dominated the stump for the last provincial election. And that, I think, was to Doug Ford's advantage.
Well, you know what? It's unfortunate this issue is pulling them together, but hopefully they can do it. The challenge to them, of course, is that these small stopgap measures are not big enough to solve the problem. Yeah. And so whether it be on the issue of arrests, keeping people in jail, that's where I think they need to put the pressure on the Prime Minister. It's not good enough to have a camera to spot somebody and have a police go and arrest them. You got to make sure the bad guy faces some time in jail and that we keep them in jail so they don't go out and do something bad next weekend. Yeah. It's also the preventive issues around keeping kids from joining gangs in the first place. I mean, that's the other big issue that we haven't really seen from any of the levels of government yet, is a really sort of concerted effort to talk about how do we make sure that a kid who's in grade 8 today isn't in a gang next year, that he's playing for a baseball team or a soccer team or a basketball team or music lessons, whatever it is. Give them an avenue of something they can do that furthers their lives so they stay out of the gangs in the first place.
Yeah, it's a long game, and it's a complicated, nuanced problem that's going to require just that much of a solution. And, really today we saw them kind of just laser focus on the law and order, the crime and punishment part. We're going to talk more about that later with Ari Goldkind. But in terms of the social side of it, you're right. I mean, there's also the element that a lot of these people that are the recidivist people that are using the firearms, it's their livelihood. That's their, sad to say, that's their job. And there's no amount of rehab that's going to help them.
Right, and that's the challenge politically, is that you have to be seen to be doing something, but there's no silver bullet to stop guns and gangs.
True.
And so I think this is why the important tone and the pictures we saw today are literally worth 1,000 words, in that the Premier and Mayor are working together, they're sharing the same stage together, they're saying the same words, and I think that it speaks, again, they can't solve the problem, so they at least have to be seen to working together to try and prevent as many bad things from happening.
Doug Ford's reaction to the Trudeau trolling question, apparently at his last press conference, he mentioned Doug Ford's name 8 times. Is this the kinder, softer, gentler Doug Ford, or is this a result of, some introspection? Was there consultation and coaching with him? Because it's a bit of a charm offensive we're seeing from him.
It really is. Think about what went on in the last week. We saw, or a week and a half, a back down on autism and change in the way they're going to do the funding, change the class sizes, changing to the sex ed curriculum. All these headline-grabbing issues where the cabinet ministers were out talking about it, and yet we had a news conference today with the Premier, and there's no headline from the Premier. There's no gotcha moment where he's back and got himself into trouble. So I think, one, we see politically the cabinet shuffles worked. He's got new horses in the race, and it's doing well for the Premier. Secondly, we see the Premier didn't react and take the bait today in these sort of news conference. He didn't pick a fight. We didn't see emotional, angry Premier. We saw somebody who was measured and really talked about the facts and repeated what the cabinet ministers had said already, which is in his own best interest. But the biggest thing I think we're going to see where we can see some emotion from the Premier is when he goes on the attack against Trudeau. I think he can sort of take that, and if he's going to vent that sort of energy that we know the Premier likes to have, is he needs to put that towards Ottawa when he's sharing the stage with the Mayor. That's a good shared opponent for them.
Mm-hmm. They really did come out flat-footed on a lot of these files, right? The weed lottery, the sex ed curriculum, class size, teachers' contracts. And even just now, I saw a note come out from the Liberals. Michael Coteau saying that because they They kind of blew it on this summer math program. He's calling for Lecce to step down. I thought Lecce, for his young and he's a rookie at a file like this, I thought he acquitted himself very well yesterday, because this is a tough hill he has to climb.
It's a tough battle, and so we saw in the first year of the Ford government, they were acting like this was a sprint. It was a 100-meter race, and there's only one guy that was the premier. And really, this is like the 4x800 relay, right? You need to have the premier's just one person who carries the baton, but you need the sort of runners 1, 2, and 3 in the beginning to sort of play out this 4-year plan. And so, politics, elections, campaigns, this all is a long time to play out. And so I think they're hitting all the right buttons. Lecce's done a great job. Rod Phillips has done a great job. Clark, Smith, these are all sort of been the stars who have calmed things down, are trying to put some issues to bed so that they can then turn and focus on the issues that really matter to them most to get them reelected. So again, it's a two-pronged approach. The premier needs to let the cabinet ministers do their job, and the cabinet ministers have to do a good job in their stead. And so so far on that reset button, they've had a good week, and this was a good finish to a strong week for the premier, I think.
Trust, communication, and less self-inflicted wounds. I guess those are the 3 of the biggies for them going forward.
I just think you gave the re-election strategy to Justin Trudeau as well. We'll see if the Liberals can follow that plan.
Jim, such great time to chat with you. Thanks again.
Thanks,
have a good weekend.
Thanks, you too.